It's an honour to be invited here to speak to the community, the STC, and share my perspective on the key tensions of leadership in modern business environment. This perspective was shaped not just in the boardroom or in academia, but in the real world crucible of complexity and chaos. My story started really on the battlefield. That's where I led men and women into battle. And, you know, in battle is where unpredictability is the only constant, and adaptability is a necessity for survival. And it's these experiences in conflict that were not just a lesson in resilience, but they were a profound insight into the dynamic nature of human systems and complexity. Upon leaving the military after 18 years, due to being diagnosed with complex PTSD, I stepped into a world where I found modern leadership practices or thinking really too narrow, too rigid. They failed to encapsulate the intricate web of key factors that define our reality. I encountered a utopian narrative of leadership that appeared to oversimplify the challenges that are present and the unpredictable nature in organizational life. It was this realization that led me down to a path of exploration into systems thinking, psychology, and social systems. And it's here I found a much richer, more nuanced understanding of leadership that acknowledged and embraced the complexities and the challenges faced at leaders at every level of the organization. And it's these key tensions, and these insights that I wish to share today. And I will share these tensions, but these tensions are not obstacles in which you are to overcome. They are realities in which we must acknowledge, we must navigate, we must balance. And these key tensions are vital for understanding leadership in complex adaptive systems. They offer a great insight into understanding our decision-making as leaders. And that's where I defined leadership as the context-sensitive and dynamic navigation of these key tensions inherent in organizational life. It's a continuous adaptation and adjustment in response to internal and external factors. These tensions there's three of them. How do we deliver or achieve the strategic aims of the organization whilst aligning and bringing people with us? Aims versus morale. How do we deliver superior value as efficiently as possible today whilst understanding what we need to change now to be viable in the future? And how do we get sufficient control and governance whilst enabling autonomy? These are all interrelated, and they are often shape our unconscious decisions. So if we break these down into the first one, so aims versus morale, if we look at it objectively, the aims of the organization become above all else. You as a leader must keep the system viable. Failure to do so, could be drastic. You won't have people in the system to look after. But we've known through years of painful experience and harsh realities that if we do not engage with our people, we do not align them, we will struggle to achieve our aims. Yes, you can be as a business very successful and driving your people forward, but that is short term. And this is where leaders often struggle, because they go on leadership courses where they take them out of the system and they think they can fix them outside the system and then throw them back into the system and wonder why they struggle. The system's not changed. And they're painted this utopian image that, I am a leader, I am pretty much like Harry Potter. I can wave my magic wand, and as long as I believe it to be true, it will come true. But this is not the fact. And they go back into the system, and they wonder why they're struggling. They understand what they've been told, but they're struggling. They often are pulled, and they don't realize, between the aims and bringing people with them. And the NHS famously broke this tension recently, because during COVID, they had a clear aim, and people were behind that aim, and they drove people towards that aim. But as they emerged out of COVID, the leaders did not make that difficult choice about what am I willing to sacrifice in performance or the aims to give space to my people so that they can recover. And because they did not make these choices, they broke the tension. And that's why you're seeing the counter-work behaviours that we're seeing currently in the NHS. Humans only have a limited amount of energy. A key enabler to managing this tension is the famous C words that we like to call culture. And culture is something that is misunderstood, misrepresented in organisations. Often they look at culture as that, they go to a leadership offsite, they throw tennis balls around for a little bit, do a few trustfuls and a few marshmallow towers, and then they'll spend the afternoon squabbling around a vague abstraction of a vision statement and some values that they'll come back and slap on the walls and ram down their employees' throats, and then wonder why they're awfully cynical about the new culture transformation that we've done. Does that sound similar-ish? Yeah. But what we found is that culture is what we call an emergent property. And what I mean by that is that we all have a watch. So if you look at your watch and you see that time is an emergent property of your watch. But if you break your watch down to all its component parts, there's not one element that gives you time. It's how you structure, design that watch together that gives you the emergence of time. And culture is exactly the same. And we've identified 13 levers that are available to any leader at any level of the organization that they can shape and design, and they can essentially emerge the behaviors that they need to drive the strategy of the organization. So often we think of culture as this nice thing. I want a nice culture. But really what we're saying with culture is that there's a boundary. And in this boundary, I'm going to constrain your behavior. Because I need to constrain your behavior, because I need it to drive what we're trying to achieve as an organization. But what is often forgotten in this is the value exchange. This is what we perceive, or the employees perceive, to be their culture. And this is what you're giving them in return to entering your boundary of your culture. And this value exchange can be anything from the obvious is money. But then there's support, there's development, there's security, there's flexibility. And this needs to be designed in your culture so that they are receiving this value exchange for being a part of the organization and helping you drive your organization forward. Failure to provide the value exchange is where we start getting the challenge of counter-work behavior because they feel aggrieved. And this is where you see the active tension between aims and morale start to break. It's a very important but very hard tension to manage. And unfortunately, these sort of fads that we have in management lexicon are eroding the true understanding about how we manage these tensions. And there's no perfect equilibrium. There's no perfect center point I'm trying to guide you on. There's 10 steps. It's about how you consciously understand and manage these tensions. The second tension that we have is How do we deliver superior value as efficiently as possible today whilst understanding what we need to change now to be viable in the future? I have never gone into an organization and told them, whoa, calm down. You're looking too much into the future. You're off there. It's always that they are myopic. They are only focused on today. And there is a balance between these two systems. There is today, inside and now, and that's your actual performance. And then we have the outside in the future, where it looks at your potential performance that you could have. This creates a great need for foresight and understanding the external environment that we're operating in. But we need to understand how much can we adapt. Every organization or team has what we call an adaptation rate. The amount that you can actually change over time before you start to unsettle the system. When you see organizations that are constantly trying to adapt more than what they can handle, this is where they start to break. They start to distract away from the operations today, and the system can't handle it. But there is what we call a base rate of change. The base rate of change is that you must, as an organization, as leader, as a team, change as quick as or quicker than your external environment or your competitors. Failure to do so will mean that you're no longer viable in the future. But with every adaptation, there needs to be what we call a settle rate. You must allow the system to settle long enough to see that that change has actually unfolded as you wanted to. But this is a tricky balance. And you see organizations that are only just focused on today, and they hit what we call high oscillations, or you'll see it as knee-jerk reactions. Suddenly, they're happy with today, they've not looked at the future, and then suddenly, as Mike Tyson once said, everyone's got a plan till you get punched in the face. Great philosopher. And he's right, because that's what's happening. Organizations are just focused on the value today, and they're constantly being hit. And I applaud you that this is where we come into the challenge around efficiency and agility. Efficiency, the more efficient you are, more performance you are, but the more efficient you are, the leaner you are. The more agility you have, and what we define agility is that you have spare resources, be it people, money, equipment, ready and rating to deploy to where the next opportunity or risk is. But you can't have both. Because the more efficient you are, less agility you have. The more agility you have, the less efficient you are. So you need to make a choice about what do you need and where do you need it. How much agility? Where is it repeatable? Where is it you can get away that, it is a closed system and you can just make that thing efficient as possible? But agility comes at a cost. It's expensive to have agility. That's why organizations always drive it out, because they have this obsession with being lean. I've got no qualms with Lean Sigma or anything, but that's another conversation. But we need to have this choice. Again, leadership, you need to keep the system viable. Yes, it may work today, but how is that going to shape yourself out in the future? And as we we heard earlier from Stefan around sustainability, what he's talking about is the perfect understanding or balancing between today and tomorrow, looking into the external environment and understanding what are those opportunities that are available, what are those partnerships in the ecosystem available that we could utilize and start to adapt and bring into our operations over time that means that we can make them more sustainable and higher performant. And that's what he means, and that's that adaptation. Failure to balance this one, you will either be all your resources to the future, and you'll start to lose the value you get today, or too much in today, and you'll start to become unviable in the future. The final tension that I'd like to look at is, how do we achieve stability, focus, and governance whilst enabling autonomy? Often I see in sort of social media narrative, God, it breaks me. I have to be on it, but LinkedIn kills me. I scroll about 2 people and then I just want to throw the phone out the window, but we'll get there. They talk about control and command and control and about hierarchies as if they are a bad thing. They are not. And it's the same mixed understanding of leadership as when they talk about management as leadership, as like leadership good, management bad. It's not. You need both. They need to be aligned. And it's often this language that confuses us, like strategy eats wrong, culture eats strategy for breakfast, all those good lexicons that we have. But it depends. If you're in a closed system, and when I talk about closed system, what I mean is that you're in a system that has low variability, low what we call requisite variety, your actions can be easily predicted. It's easy. It's like thinking about a factory like Mr. Kipling's. It's all about efficiency. You want to have as much control as possible. You want high divisions of labour, and that's why you see inside the factory of Mr. Kipling's, you've got Sandra, bless her. She's been the person that sticks the cherry on the cake for the last 50 years, and she loves it. But they've got her there because she's the best one at it. And you've got Dave as the one that sorts the metal tins out. But we're driving for efficiency. We want that closed system, and that's what it works. Where autonomy is what we talk about open systems. If you're in an open system and there's high variety, high requisite variety that's present, you can't predict the actions or decisions on how they'll unfold in the external environment. At a human level, autonomy is the only way that you can deal with requisite variety. Sure, we can design organizations to do the same, but at a human level is the only way. But you can be too autonomous. And when I say that, is you come too autonomous, that teams start to break away from the system and do their own thing. They lose their identity. They come distracted away from the strategy, the core aims of the organization. And you see this a lot. You've seen this quite famously in Network Rail currently, where they had devolution. Yes, devolution was a great idea to meet the different needs of the routes and regions, but they didn't provide the requisite control and stability to enable that autonomy to happen. So you had routes and regions breaking off and creating their own fiefdoms, destroying shared learning and knowledge across the whole system. So control and stability is not a bad thing if you're trying to create the same thing. And that comes with innovation. Because, it needs to happen where it should happen. Just think yourself in McDonald's. If you go to McDonald's, you get the same thing no matter which one you go to, the same experience. What you don't want is little Timmy on the Big Mac counter going, do you know what would make this Big Mac even better? If I chuck 3 chicken nuggets in there. Wouldn't that be banging? Yes, I'm sure it'd be nice, Timmy, but we don't need that right now. We just want the same Big Mac. But autonomy is something that is, or empowerment as you call it, we call it mission command in the military, but it's something that is widely misunderstood. And again, this thinking that I can just wave my magic wand and you're empowered. Just like my door's always open. But to be empowered or to create or set the conditions for autonomy, these things need to exist. You must have clear intent about what you are trying to achieve. And that person must, or team, must understand what they do to contribute to that intent. There must be constraints. Everyone's constrained. They sometimes don't act like it, but even the Conservative government is constrained at times. And they must have the requisite knowledge, skills, and experience and role clarity to be empowered. If these conditions are set, that means that they have maximum freedom of action. And what we really mean by autonomy is that they know what they need to achieve, but due to the unpredictable nature of organizations, that when the plan changes, they can make sense. They've got a mental construct to make sense of what those changes are and what choices they have to achieve the intent, but in line with the constraints. And if their choices are short, they're not very obvious, and they need to go beyond those constraints, that's when the communication happens. And saying, look, I need to do this, but I'm constrained by this. Can you remove that constraint for me? If you don't have these conditions in place, then all that happens is inevitably the plan changes. They can't make sense of the choices because they don't really know what you want. You've only told them how you want it. That means that all they can do is stop and look up and ask for permission on what to do next, which slows down execution and means that you cannot keep up with the requisite variety, and then thus you become unviable. But as we talked about skills, as rightly said by Pim, skills, there is a skill shortage. And we don't have these perfect people that will come into our organization and have all the skills available straight away. That's okay. Because all we do is bring in the constraints. And we develop the skill and knowledge of our people through directive measures, training, development, mentoring. And then, as their knowledge grows, we widen out those constraints and we use more coaching to build and unlock that experience. So that as they develop, you widen out their constraints to give them the full freedom of action. So when you're thinking about autonomy and you're thinking about, have I set the conditions, please think back to this model and think, are these here? Are they present? Are they understood? Don't be afraid to stop and ask your employees and just say to them, what do you think your role is in this organization? What decisions do you think you can make and you can't make? What are your constraints? I'd be fascinated to see the difference between what you perceive to be true and what they perceive to be true. And if we can get this explicit from our people, we can make it understandable. We can understand the gap between what they believe, what we believe, and then we can close that gap. Because often what is confusing in managing these tensions is that we only work on our perspective of the world, our perception of our reality, and we don't invite the perspectives of others. We don't open up that conversation to our people to understand what is actually held implicitly in their heads. Do that, you'd be surprised. So, as we look back through the tensions, as I said, there is no perfect equilibrium in these tensions. There is no 10 steps guide to being a better leader. All there is about the conscious awareness of the context you're in and self-awareness. Because these three tensions map over to personality. So, understanding your personality, we can make it a good guess on where your predisposition for behavior lies across this model. I'm a trait-based psychologist, so we look at the 5 a big five of personality. But really, when you look at it, the people that are more outcome focused, probably you're more reds if you've done type or anything like that before. They're probably going to be predispositioned towards the aim. Where you're more greens, you're people focused. They're going to have a more predisposition towards aligning and bringing people with us. When you have people that are open to experience, they're going to be more lean towards the future. Where people who are high in conscientiousness are probably going to have a more lean towards today and about efficiency. And when you have a mix of conscientiousness and outcome focus, that's where we tend to see a more lean towards control and stability. Where we have open to experience, a more informal look of personality, that's where we see a bit higher propensity to allow for autonomy. So when you're leading your organizations, your teams, we need people to be more conscious of their self-awareness as a leader, more conscious of the context, and understand, what do I need to dial up or dial down or do differently to set the conditions to enable others to act? How can we maintain the viability of our system so that we can achieve growth? We can achieve the future potential of performance, but at the same time that we align and engage our people so that they receive that value exchange and they never want to leave your organization. It's there for your taking. It just takes conscious effort. Hope you enjoyed the talk so far, and I'd love to welcome any questions from the audience.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, nice to meet you again. Yeah,
Is this work?
I could sort of.
There we go. I really enjoyed that again. You made a point about the importance of structure, but I think I'm someone who's really interested in structure around innovation and digital and testing and adapting. And is it not the case that having a too structured environment, like in a military situation, you've got extreme pressures, but in a digital innovation-orientated world that we live in, the importance of adaptability, is it not the case that having too much structure will often stifle innovation? I'm interested in your opinion on what you're saying about that point.
Yeah, and as model showed that too much of something, can be a limitation. I like chocolate, too much of it, I start getting too fat. Fatter. But you're right in the sense of you can't have too much structure, but you need structure. You need some form of governance and control to enable that platform for people to be innovative, to have that psychological safe environment to test and challenge what could be possible. And that's where I look back on the model around the potential of the future, and today we need that space. But where I find it goes terribly wrong is that they don't have clear understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And that's the structure you need in the sense of what are we actually trying to achieve? And that gives them the understanding to look to the external environment and make sense of it and think what could actually be true. And there's a good relationship between the art of the possible and how we bring that into organizations, especially into your organization, about how you adapt that. And there's a key question, it's called, what would have to be true for that to work? That's where we provide that structure in there. So we allow people to go out and think about, right, that's what we're trying to achieve in the future for this purpose, in order us to achieve this, what is possible, and then we need that ability to ask that question seriously about what would have to be true for that to work, and how can we set those things in place over the adaptation rate that we can handle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Ike.
Hi, Dorian Smelly from Total Control Pro. Really enjoyed that. I wonder if you could say anything about, in the context of the tensions of leadership, if there's anything that you've observed when we're leading different generations, so the younger guys versus the more experienced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or whether that's just a narrative that us as leaders, we just need to let go of.
I think there's more to it. There's more hype around it than what actually needs. And when you think about our model of culture that I showed you, it's really thinking about that value exchange. This belief that, I don't know, some of the stuff I've heard are, millennials are just, lazy, they've got no loyalty, they've got this, they've just got more options. Fundamentally, we've gone away from a world where our social network was a lot smaller. So we pretty much followed in the footpaths of our parents, our local communities, what was available. They have more choice. And with that choice the fact that we're interconnected with communications is that they can see what's actually out there. They see what's fair, what's just. And so that's where it's an absolute imperative to make sure that you're shaping that environment and giving that value exchange to keep them engaged. And when we look at it, what they want is not changed. It's just that we start to recognize it more. The sort of innate motivation for human beings in an organization is around autonomy. They want autonomy. They want, some semblance of control over decisions about what their role responsibility is. They want to know those constraints and what decisions they can make. It's about relatedness. They want to feel valued. They want to feel, safe in the organization. It's like we said, it's shocking research earlier about the LGBT community don't feel safe in engineering environments. That's just crazy to me. Even from my military background, that's crazy. And the final thing is around competence. They want to be challenged and they want to be developed. And I think that this need is coming more to the front, and leaders are perceiving that in the wrong perspective. And they're seeing it as a challenge to them. It's not. It's just they just want those needs to be met. Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I found that very interesting. Just pick up on what you said about agility versus efficiency.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll stand up, you can't see me.
That's right.
Yeah. I often start from a strategic point of either being market-led or production-led. And I found your discussion of agility versus efficiency very interesting in that context. But I think they all fit together. And I think one of the things I find when people talk about agility is that doesn't necessarily fit someone who's production-led.
No.
Because you just need to be hard on efficient.
Yes.
And I think the big problem is, and I think it's something that, strategy consultancies like us have to get to the root of, is what are you as an organization? And there's a difference between market-led, you do whatever the market wants, to being production-led, which is you serve a niche in the market very efficiently. And I think there's another one we all miss so too often, which is the role of marketing. And I think BMW, to my mind, is one of the absolute classics. It's a brilliant production-led organization, but its marketing is very, very effective. And I think, you can bring three things together here. You can bring together the communications and marketing side. You've put some very interesting aspects on the behavioral side I've always missed in terms of trying to design a business program. And I think it's interesting how it can go across a very wide attribute.
Yes, and that's why I said it depends. So it really does depend. I'm not saying the autonomy is the only way and that you can have max agility and efficiency is bad, not at all. It's about what do we need in the context. So yes, if you're production-led in your functions, the function, that means that they are going to be really efficient and you want them to be efficient. Of course you do. But you've got to understand the challenges that that presents. That presents when the more lean you are, less agility it means. And what I'm essentially saying is that it takes longer for you to change. Of course it does, because when you're saying about anything to do with change, the more efficient you are, you've got less resources to focus or pull away from today's activity to handle the change of the future. So it doesn't mean it can't happen, it's just going to be slower. But if you are production-led and you are really efficient and you can't then create agility, your next friend is foresight. You must have foresight to look out to the future and predict the changes that are going to happen. And that essentially stretches time for you. And that means it gives you more time to adapt to those changes so that you are, as I said, you are changing, but you're not breaking the system or what you've already got, the value you're already producing today. And you can have these across your organizations in several ways. That's why you've got to think about what the function is, the primary activities you deliver, and then how do you design your organization knowing your primary activities. Does that make sense? Cool. Thank you. Yes. It is. Without intent is chaos.
Hi, Mike. One of the things I wanted to just get your thoughts on, we spoke briefly before about, we use sport as an example, but that transition from one end of that tension to the other. And I think in a sporting environment, it's really easy to go, you hire a manager that might get you out of relegation or win you a championship, and then you might transition to a more autonomous, longer-term manager. How should we as leaders balance that in engineering, whatever it is we do, between 1 month we might be getting a project out the door and it has to be less autonomous, and then we want to move to a more innovation future? Because that's what I find difficult as a leader, between kind of show and tell, and how you transition between the two without losing people.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. Thank you. So, and that's really true. So normally when organisations are not doing so well, we may bring in a new leader. So the first challenge is that you see it all the time. A new leader comes in, is almost they have to change something to like prove their worth. But I would advise to just slow down on that, because you've seen it's about understanding. And we have mental models that we all use, and they're like our way of navigating the world. But we need to challenge our own assumptions as leaders. Are we only looking for things to confirm our belief that we already hold to be true? Or are we looking for those patterns or mismatches, the difference between what I believe to be true and what's actually happening in reality? So when you come to an organization, I urge you to not just be suckered by the data and go down several layers of the organization to listen, learn, and understand what's going on. But what you're coming to there, Tom, is around sometimes, and this is where the tension of control and autonomy comes in. If you have got a dysfunctional organization, I probably would encourage you that you probably will need to grasp control. I would probably see that you'll be more in the tension of control and governance to realign the thinking, realign the structures, the processes that are in place. Because if the structure and environment is not suited, you need to change that. You need to create that. But as many organizations, as we spoke about Eddie Jones, unfortunately, he didn't let go of that control. So when he came in, he did not have that realization, that new understanding that, we've got ourselves in a place where I can start to widen out those constraints and to loosen that control to give my people the freedom of action. And there's always going to be a time where you may need to seize control, but there will always be a time where you need to release that back and provide autonomy. Otherwise, you'll just be stuck in one area, and again, you will not be able to deal with the requisite variety that comes, and you will no longer become viable. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Oh, cheers. Thank you.